With the news on Friday that the Chicago Bears have hired John Fox to be the 15th head coach in the history of the organization, I'm sure many of you have come on here to click onto this video to see me rant and rave about this like I do so many other things Chicago Bears related, and talk about how dumb this is and how backwards of a move this is, and that of all the people, John Fox is going to be the savior. Well, I'm sorry to disappoint you. That's not really the case. You're mistaken. Just not going to go there. On the flip side, if you're a Bears fan that is all giggly tits and excited about this, and you expect to come on here and see me automatically change my ways and pray this move to kingdom come and talk about how this is such a great landscape-changing move for the Chicago Bears organization, you are also mistaken, and I'm sorry to disappoint you. Look, when I look at the problems facing the Chicago Bears organization heading into this offseason, in particular when it came to the head coaching search, I realize that there might not have been a perfect candidate. And when somebody sits there and says, well, who are you going to get that was better than John Fox? Who are you going to guarantee is going to win a Super Bowl as a head coach, especially from the coordinator ranks? It's a fair point. There is no guarantee. But also based off of history, I can pretty much guarantee that John Fox isn't going to win a Super Bowl with the Chicago Bears. Frankly, might not even take that team to the Super Bowl any point in time in the next 3 to 4 years. And then when you sit there and you say, well, they should have had a young coach to go with a young general manager, and that would have been the way to go so they could both grow and roll together. You know, the Bears have went down that coordinator route so many times, and how's that worked out for this organization? They needed to do something different. They had to shake things up a little bit, and John Fox, if nothing else, represents that. Here's what John Fox brings to the table. Unlike Mark Trestman, the previous buffoon at head coach, the Bears get discipline, leadership, and toughness, all things that are desperately lacking and sorely needed in that organization, in particular in that locker room. Fox brings all of that in abundance. He brings a proven NFL head coaching resume, which previous coaches like Wanstead and Duran and Lovie and Trestman just flat out don't have. You know, even Ditka didn't have this resume when he got the Bears job in 1982. John Fox had success with the Carolina Panthers. He had success with the Denver Broncos. He, in particular, also has a record of turning things around and turning teams around quickly. By his second year in Carolina, he was taking a Jake Delhomme-led team into the Super Bowl. By the time he got to the Denver Broncos, their first season with Tim Tebow as a freaking starter, for crying out loud, they won the division title and they won a playoff game. John Fox can get things turned around just like that. He has a very respected defensive mind and a defensive pedigree and a defensive resume that few can match in the NFL today. As a result, for a team that is looking to focus on rebuilding an old and bad defense that needs an identity, that needs a scheme, that needs a personality, John Fox brings all of that to the table in great abundance. Here's what this hiring represents. It's a statement that things could be changing in Hallis Hall, and that there's an understanding that the culture needed to change, and that this may in a lot of ways represent a culture change in Hallis Hall. So many times the Bears, when going into the head coaching search, tried to out-sleuth themselves and find a mediocre to somewhat hot coordinator candidate, usually on the defensive side of the ball. But more importantly of all, didn't believe in investing big-time money in the head coaching position, because I don't think the organization led by the McCaskies ever really believed that putting big money into a head coach is the way to pay it off when it comes to winning a championship. Of course, they've been wrong, and the results have bore themselves out, and they've been stuck in a cycle of mediocrity for 2+ decades as an organization. John Fox, and hiring him off of a Broncos team that has made the playoffs 4 straight years, coming from a Carolina team that he took to a couple NFC championship games and a Super Bowl appearance where they came this close to beating Tom Brady and Belichick and the New England Patriots. You know they had to fork over dough. They were going to have to pay money, a lot of money, to get this guy. That's a statement signing. That's a culture change for an organization that desperately needed one. In terms of when you look at this John Fox hiring, while some people might call him the white Lovie Smith in terms of his accomplishments, especially during his time in Carolina, and I agree with that to a degree, he does represent a statement and culture change to an organization that badly needed it, similar to how Dusty Baker did for the Chicago Cubs when he was brought in before the 2003 season. Laugh if you want now, but it's revisionist history. There is no question that Dusty Baker was a big-time game changer for a Cubs organization that needed one. Most importantly of all, he brought expectations with him. He brought a culture change with him. And this is what John Fox can potentially do for the Chicago Bears. I think it also brings an understanding of just how bad this team is, and that going the CFL route, going the coordinator route, just isn't going to be good enough. They need somebody that flat out knows what the hell they're doing because this team sucks. This organization is a bad way. It also brings hope and direction for an organization that flat out needs it, and a fan base that really is in need of it at this point in time. Not just fooling themselves and always thinking it's better than it really is, like so many idiotic Bear fans do, but actually legitimate hope that things are going to get better and that this organization actually cares about winning. You guys don't have to pretend anymore. Mark Trestman was a knucklehead. Phil Henry was a knucklehead. Jerry Angelo was a knucklehead. The last 2 years, you knew better, even though you wanted to believe differently. You knew this team was mediocre, if not flat out sucked. Now you can admit it. And you can accept it, but you can also see that there's a reason for hope and there's a reason to believe that the direction is slowly changing for this organization. It's also a sign that the Bears brass and new general manager Ryan Pace listened to Ernie Accorsi. I'll say my piece about Ernie Accorsi and the fact that I think, just because he's had some pedigree and some success, when he built a winner with the Giants and everything like that, that doesn't make him a genius. This is also the same guy in the 2004 NFL draft that could have just drafted Phillip Rivers or Big Ben Roethlisberger, who were both, to me, clearly better prospects coming out of college than Eli Manning was at Ole Miss. This is a guy that sat there and traded up from number 4 to number 1 in order to get Eli Manning, basically, and got the third best quarterback in the 3-quarterback draft that year. I mean, for the good that Ernie Accorsi's done, his draft history wasn't always the best, and then you've got that decision. You could say Eli Manning won those 2 rings, but how much of that is really truly Eli Manning? And at the end of the day, would you rather have Eli Manning as a player, Big Ben as a player, or Phillip Rivers as a player? Come on now. But with that said, they're not listening to a headhunter service. McCaskey and Phillips themselves aren't assuming that they know better because they clearly freaking don't. They are at least listening to somebody that should, in theory, know better. So they listened to Ernie Accorsi, and Accorsi has ties to Fox. Fox is an Accorsi guy going back to the days with the Giants when Fox was Jim Fossil's defensive coordinator. This is also a symbolic thing in the sense that the Bears are going to be returning to an old-school Bears football type of style. Defense, ball control, running the clock, physicality, those things that John Fox values and covets, especially conservative play in clutch situations. That's what the Chicago Bears always pretend themselves to be and always love themselves to be, both the organization, the media surrounding the team, and the fan base. It's about Bears football. What the hell does that mean? Bears football over the past 2 decades in a lot of ways has been mediocre to bad, shitty football. I don't want to see Bears football. I want to see winning football. I want to see championship football. At least I can say this, though, is that John Fox does bring an identity, which was something that was clearly lacking over the last 2 years under Ed Moran Trestman, especially on the defensive side of the ball. They just had no identity. Frankly, they didn't have an identity on the offensive side of the ball either in 2014 for this so-called elite offense. Here's what this hiring doesn't mean, though, is it doesn't necessarily mean the end of Jay Cutler in Chicago, and that's a problem, and that should be incredibly concerning. While they didn't sit there and necessarily focus on Jay Cutler in this coaching search, it doesn't necessarily symbolize the end of Jay Cutler in Chicago. In order for this team to progress and take that next step and start to grow and get better, and in order for this organization to improve, in order for this organization to begin the full and complete rebuild that must happen, Jay Cutler must go. It is a sunken cost. And with bringing a John Fox in at age 60, a guy that's coached at 2 previous places with veteran quarterbacks, is he really going to want to sit there and necessarily move on from Jay Cutler right away? Or are we going to sit there and give Jay Cutler another chance, this time to sink a 3rd general manager and a 3rd head coach? That concerns the piss out of me, and that should concern the piss out of a lot of you Bear fans. I don't think this hiring necessarily means an immediate payoff in 2015. This team was really bad. They were clearly the worst team in the division. You've got a Vikings team with Teddy Bridgewater that is going to grow and potentially get better. You have a Detroit Lions team that finished 11-5 last year and would have to drop a long ways, along with the Bears improving a long ways in 2015 for the Bears to finish ahead of them. And then the Packers are the Packers, and the Bears just don't measure up still at this point in time. There's not going to be a lot of immediate payoff here, and I'm wondering how ugly it could potentially be if the Bears win 5 or 6 games in 2015 under John Fox, which is very possible because of how bad this team has drafted in recent years and how many bad trades and free agent moves they have made in recent years. How patient everybody's going to be. Is there going to be a real sense of panic if there isn't that immediate payoff, which is very likely there might not be? It also, again, could mean that this team is not prepared to do the total and full rebuild in the draft that is necessary, that they must do. And I disagree with this notion that in the NFL, you could completely and totally rebuild in 1 to 2 years. That's not necessarily the case, especially if you don't have that young franchise quarterback already in the works. In the case of the Chicago Bears, it's going to take 3 or 4 years. All these years of bad drafting, and you can go years and years and years and years back to the bad drafting. It takes time to unbury yourself from all of that. It's not going to happen instantly. And if the Bears do get some progress in 1 or 2 years and they're making the playoffs, then more likely than not, they haven't done a very good job of rebuilding through the draft. They tried to sit there and do it in short-term panic type of reflex moves because they brought in John Fox. And that is only perpetuating the cycle that has created the problem to begin with and kicking the ball down the road and delaying the inevitable total and complete rebuild that must happen. We also know that this won't necessarily mean the end of Green Bay's reign of dominance in that division. Until proven otherwise, it doesn't. It also doesn't mean a Super Bowl championship, and here's why I say that. At the end of the day, the goal is not to make the playoffs. The goal is not to reach the Super Bowl. The goal is to win the Super Bowl. This is a John Fox who has made the Super Bowl with 2 different teams, and that's incredibly impressive. I believe only 6 head coaches in NFL history have ever done that, so it's a very elite list. But he's also lost both times he's been there. And what should really be concerning to Bears fans is that he got closer in the 2003 season to winning a Super Bowl against the New England Patriots with Jake Delhomme as his quarterback than he did after the 2013 season in Super Bowl 48 with Peyton Manning and all those weapons on offense at his disposal. That should be incredibly concerning. You really expect John Fox to come in and bring in a Super Bowl championship or even get close to sniffing it with Jay Cutler and this cast of fucks where they're too busy fighting on Twitter to bother fighting on the football field? By fighting on Twitter, I mean fighting with the media, fighting with fans, challenging fans to fight, and hell, fighting amongst each other. Fox ain't bringing the Super Bowl to Chicago. I could damn near guarantee it. Only one coach in NFL history, technically, has ever won a Super Bowl title with this third team, and that was Pete Carroll last year. That's it. No coach has ever went to the Super Bowl with 3 different teams. One of the closest guys that I could think of that did that might have been Dick Vermeil with the Eagles and then the Rams, where he won a Super Bowl, and then with the Chiefs, where he got them to the playoffs. But that's one recent example I could think of. A lot of times when guys get to their third stop, they tend to have lost touch. It tends to not go as well. Their time may be gone, and things don't tend to work out as well. And even when you're talking about Pete Carroll, you're talking about head coaching experience in the NFL that went back like 15 years with the Jets and Patriots. He went to USC. He learned how to be a winner at a big-time level, you would argue a professional level, and that translated over to the NFL level. He learned those lessons, and he became who he was. So comparing John Fox to Pete Carroll, the guy who pushed his shit in at Super Bowl 48, I don't know about all that. And again, I emphasize, if he couldn't win with Peyton Manning, as much of a choke artist as Peyton Manning is, and he couldn't win with a far superior team in Denver, and frankly, compared to the Bears, a far superior team in Carolina with a superior quarterback, at least during that season, in Jake Delhomme, who made far more big plays in key situations than a Jay Cutler could ever imagine. What the hell type of hope do the Chicago Bears have for winning one, or frankly even getting to one, with John Fox at the helm with this cast of sorry characters? I'm not going to poon this hiring all that much because I know that they could have done a lot worse, and frankly I'm surprised that they didn't do a whole lot worse. I'm not going to sit there and tell you that there wouldn't have been a certain coordinator that would have been better for the job, but at this point in time I can't guarantee that one would have necessarily been any better. John Fox was a buzzworthy, big-name hiring that you would not expect from the Chicago Bears. At some point in time, I do expect this to pay some dividends. Within 2 to 3 years, the Bears might be in a playoff race. They might be a team to take seriously in the NFC North and in the NFC as a conference as a whole. However, I know deep down inside that this will not end well ultimately, and this will lead to more disappointment, and that this will very well be the move that sits there. And while it changes the culture in one way, in a lot of ways represents more of the same, and we'll be looking back on it and say, it was worth a try, but it ultimately didn't work.